5 real hiking horror stories. So terrifying you won't believe they happened. Welcome to DTC, the place of the brave, where chilling tales await to send a shiver down your spine. Today, we dive into 5 true hiking horror stories that will make you think twice before hitting the trails. From eerie sounds echoing through the night to shadowy figures lurking in the mist, these stories will challenge everything you thought you knew about the wilderness. Brace yourself for spine-tingling accounts of the unknown. These are not your typical hiking adventures. Get ready for a journey into terror that you won't soon forget. Story 1. True chilling hiking horror story. A night in the woods. Have you ever felt a sense of dread while hiking alone in the woods? The kind of dread that sinks deep into your chest, gnawing at you, making you question every sound, every rustle. It's a feeling that most of us brush off or attribute to our imagination. But sometimes it's more than just a fleeting thought. Sometimes it's a warning, something primal and ancient, a sign that you're not as alone as, at first, everything felt normal. We talked and laughed, taking in the beauty of nature around us. But as we ventured deeper into the forest, something started to feel off. It was subtle at first, just a nagging feeling at the back of my mind. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone standing there, but there was no one. No footsteps following us, no voices, just silence. Then it happened. We were about a mile into the trail when I noticed a flicker of light through the trees. It wasn't the usual glint of sunlight or the reflection of water. No, this was something different, something unnatural. It was faint at first, like the glow of a distant lantern, but there was no way anyone could be out here at this hour. The light was almost spectral, moving through the trees in a way that didn't make sense. "Do you see that?" I whispered to my girlfriend. She looked, squinting her eyes against the gathering darkness. "I don't." "What is that?" I took a hesitant step forward, trying to get a better look. The light flickered again, and for a moment I could have sworn it was a figure, a shadow, shifting among the trees. My heart skipped a beat, and I felt a chill run down my spine. "Let's go back," I said, suddenly uneasy. But she didn't want to leave just yet. She was curious like I was, wanting to figure out what it was. So we kept walking. I remember feeling like I was walking into something I couldn't see, like something was watching us from the shadows, waiting. As we neared the source of the light, the air around us grew heavier. The temperature dropped, and I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. We were nearing the edge of a clearing when the light flickered one last time and then vanished, leaving us in complete darkness. I felt my stomach churn with dread. "Where did it go?" I asked, trying to steady my voice. Before she could answer, we both heard it. A low, guttural sound, like something exhaling, but so deep, so heavy, that it didn't feel like it came from any animal I knew. It was almost human, but not. And then, just as we were about to turn back, I saw it. A figure. Dark, indistinct, but unmistakably there. It stood just inside the edge of the clearing, barely visible in the fading light. For a moment I thought it was a person, maybe someone else who had wandered out here, but then I realized it was wrong. It was too tall, too unnatural. Its shape flickered in and out of focus, like it wasn't fully part of our world. I froze. My heart pounded in my chest, and I could hear my breath quicken as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. And that's when I heard the voice. It wasn't a voice at all, more like a thought, a feeling, a command that entered my mind without warning. Run. It was so clear, so powerful, that it wasn't a suggestion. It was a demand. I didn't have to think twice. My feet moved before my brain could process what was happening. I grabbed my girlfriend's arm, pulling her with me as I ran back toward the trail. But as we sprinted, the darkness seemed to press in on us, wrapping around us like a suffocating blanket. The trees, once towering and comforting, now felt like they were closing in, their branches reaching out to grab us, their shadows alive with a sinister intent. I could hear the figure moving behind us, though I dared not look back. The sound of its steps was eerily silent, but there was a presence, an overwhelming sense that it was right there, just beyond my sight. When we finally reached the trailhead, gasping for breath, I looked behind us, half expecting to see the figure standing in the clearing, waiting for us to return. But there was nothing. The forest was silent again, as though the thing that had followed us had never existed. We didn't speak for the rest of the walk back to the car. Neither of us wanted to acknowledge what had happened, but in the back of my mind I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been with us in those woods, something ancient and malevolent, something that didn't want us to leave. When we finally made it back to the car, we didn't look back at the woods. We didn't say a word about it to anyone, but the sense of dread lingered, gnawing at me. It's been months since that night, but every time I close my eyes, I see that figure standing in the clearing, just beyond the trees. Every rustle in the dark makes my skin crawl, and I can't help but feel that something is watching me, waiting. I don't know what we encountered that night, but I do know one thing. I will never go back to those woods. There's something out there, something that's not quite human. Something that waits for the curious, the unwary, and the brave. And it isn't done with us yet. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like and subscribe for more chilling tales. And remember, if you ever feel that cold shiver creeping down your spine while hiking in the woods, don't ignore it. Because sometimes it's not just your imagination. Sometimes it's a warning. Do you dare to listen to the dark? If tonight's tale gave you chills, let us know your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear what creeps you out and what other stories you'd love us to explore. Don't miss out on the next terrifying story. Subscribe to DTC, The Place of the Brave, and join the family that thrives on the unknown. Tap the notification bell so you're the first to hear every spine-chilling tale. Share this video with someone brave enough to face the darkness. And let's dive deeper into the creeps that haunt our world. Comment below and become part of the terror. The darkness is calling, and we want you with us. Story 2, A Ghost Town Horror Expedition. A few months ago, a spontaneous decision changed my girlfriend and I's lives forever. We were looking for something new and a little daring, so when I heard about an old ghost town in Utah where the ruins of houses that once housed a long-lost community remained, I knew I couldn't miss it. The town had been forgotten, swallowed by time and the decay of the people who lived there. The buildings, warehouses, and shops that had been abandoned since the 1930s were now just crumbling ruins with a mysterious history. To get there, we had to drive down a long dirt road to the bottom of a steep hill. To reach the abandoned town, we had to climb to the top of the hill through hay fields and old ruins. The surroundings were like another world, cold and silent, as if time had stopped here long ago. Not a soul, not a sound, only the wind blowing through the dry branches. As the car stopped, I felt a strong presence. I couldn't explain the feeling, but I clearly felt as if something was watching us, an invisible but very real presence. Sometimes feelings like this are just imagination, but this time it wasn't. Anxiety began to grow in my heart. I tried to calm myself down and continued to step out of the car. My girlfriend, who was with me, also seemed a little worried, but she didn't say anything. We started climbing the hill. The atmosphere around here was different, something heavy, inexplicable. The more I walked, the more I felt as if something was following me. Graves were scattered across the hilltop, old, nameless graves marked only by strange stones. These graves were not those of adults, but of children. Small graves, as if they had been forgotten for years. No one remembered them anymore. The first grave we came across was that of a little girl. The stones were piled on top of each other to form a simple grave, but there was a strange feeling surrounding it, a strange coldness. I stood nearby, looking at the stones, feeling as if something was waiting. This feeling made me unable to breathe. Deep down, I had the feeling that this little girl had not yet been able to move on, that her spirit was still here, lurking around us. We continued to walk past more graves, each one a silent reminder of the presence of unreleased souls. The air became thick, as if someone was watching us, watching our every move. Every time I turned to look at my girlfriend, I felt as if someone was standing behind us, in the shadows, but when I turned back, there was nothing. The air was thicker than ever. I could feel the space around us being squeezed, as if an invisible force was pressing down on us. I tried to speak to dispel the feeling, but my voice seemed weak and unable to resonate. My girlfriend, although she looked worried, continued walking, saying nothing, as if she also felt something, but did not want to admit it. After a while, we decided to turn back. I couldn't take it anymore. I felt like we had been here too long. As we started down the hill, I felt something strange. It seemed like someone was walking with us. An invisible footstep followed us, unseen, but I could feel it clearly. Every time I turned around, there was no one, just darkness and the shadows of the surrounding graves. However, the feeling didn't go away. It only grew stronger until I couldn't stand it anymore. Finally, we got back to the car, but the uneasiness still lingered. When I got home, I found the garage door was open. At first, I thought maybe my mother had opened it and forgotten to close it, but when I asked her, she said she hadn't opened the garage door. She was in Salt Lake visiting her grandmother, and she didn't have the garage remote with her. A strange feeling filled my mind, and I couldn't explain it. Could it be that something had followed us from that town? I couldn't shake the thought. A few days later, when I was home alone, I put my 6-month-old son, Trayden, to bed. I turned on the baby monitor so I could keep an eye on him. My girlfriend went to work. My mother went to the doctor. I sat in the kitchen, waiting for the house to quiet down. Suddenly, I heard a cry coming from the monitor. It wasn't Trayden's cry, but a strange cry, echoing through the monitor. I rushed up to his room, but when I entered, I found Trayden still lying on the bed, sleeping soundly as if nothing had happened. Everything was the same, but a feeling of fear rose up in me. This strange feeling, that cry, seemed so familiar. It was like the cry I had heard when I stood in front of the children's graves in the old ghost town. I can't explain what happened, but I have a feeling that something followed us from that town. Maybe the spirit of some unreleased child, a troubled soul. And when I think back, I can't help but feel that I did something wrong by going there, by touching the graves, the stones, and by not paying attention to the strange signs. From that day on, the strange phenomena became more frequent. Footsteps from unknown sources, doors opening by themselves, shadows appearing in places no one could explain. I couldn't sleep. Every night I felt like someone was standing right next to my bed, but when I opened my eyes, there was nothing. The nightmares kept coming, and I couldn't escape. Maybe we hadn't left that ghost town completely. What we saw, what we felt, may have followed us back, not only in space, but also in our minds. Can we escape it? Or is this just the beginning of a long, endless nightmare? As I sat staring at the open garage door in the dark, I couldn't help but think that there are things in this world that we cannot understand, that we cannot explain. Things beyond human understanding, unseen ghosts, souls that cannot rest. Maybe they are watching us from deep in the darkness until we have nothing left to protect. Do you dare to listen to the dark? If tonight's tale gave you chills, let us know your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear what creeps you out and what other stories you'd love us to explore. Don't miss out on the next terrifying story. Subscribe to DTC, The Place of the Brave, and join the family that thrives on the unknown. Tap the notification bell so you're the first to hear every spine-chilling tale. Share this video with someone brave enough to face the darkness, and let's dive deeper into the creeps that haunt our world. Story 3. The Strange Laughter on the Trail. It was the sort of evening that, looking back, I should have known would be the start of something I would never forget. The kind of night when everything, the light, the air, the very ground beneath our feet, seemed to vanish, leaving behind only darkness and an overwhelming sense of dread. I had always been a fan of hiking, and the thought of trekking through the woods with friends sounded like the perfect way to spend a chilly winter evening. But that night, oh that night, something was wrong. And it started off so innocently. My friends and I had heard rumors about a well-known trail through a local forest, just a few miles outside of town. People talked about it like it was a rite of passage, an easy walk in the daylight, but one that few dared to take after dark. It wasn't a long trail, just a couple of miles, but something about the idea of walking through it at night seemed inviting, thrilling even. The thought of exploring the unknown, of stepping into the kind of mystery you could only encounter in the darkness, was too tempting. We weren't scared of the night. After all, we were experienced hikers, right? We set off just before dusk, the chill of winter already creeping into our bones. A thick fog had begun to roll in as we parked at the edge of the forest and grabbed our gear. Flashlights, check. Snacks, check. Water, check. We were prepared, or so we thought. None of us were worried about the fog. In fact, it added a sense of adventure. We jokingly talked about how it felt like the perfect setting for. The first few miles of the trail were just as expected, nothing out of the ordinary. We walked and laughed, occasionally stopping to chat or snap a picture. The fog thickened, but we could still see the trail clearly enough. The trees, tall and dark against the sky, seemed to stretch on forever. There was an unsettling silence around us, but we dismissed it as just the peacefulness of nature. The occasional snap of a twig or the rustle of leaves was enough to assure us that animals But as we continued deeper into the forest, the atmosphere began to change. The path grew narrower, the trees growing denser, their branches gnarled and twisted as if they were reaching out to us. The fog closed in around us like a thick veil, muffling any sounds we might have made. It was like we were walking through a dream, or perhaps a nightmare, I couldn't tell. The deeper we went, the darker it seemed to get. Our flashlights illuminated only small pockets of space around us, leaving everything. At some point, we stopped walking, our instincts telling us that something wasn't right. There were no more sounds of wildlife, no more rustling leaves. Only the steady crunch of our boots on the frost-covered ground and the faint sound of our breaths, heavy in the cold air. I glanced over at my friends. Their faces were pale in the glow of the flashlights, their eyes darting around, no longer filled with excitement, but something else. Fear. We had walked past the point where the trail should have looped back, but now we couldn't find the familiar landmarks we had passed earlier. The trees seemed to have rearranged themselves, closing in tighter around you. Then came the first unsettling sound, a footstep. At first I thought it was one of us, maybe Mark or Sarah, lagging behind. But when I looked, they were still walking right beside me. The sound was too deliberate, too heavy. It was as if someone or something was deliberately trailing. We stopped, hearts pounding. We turned our heads, scanning the trees, but saw nothing. Just the oppressive darkness, the suffocating fog. The sound of breathing filled the air, and my throat tightened with panic. It wasn't any of us. It came from behind us, too close, too intentional. "Did you hear that?" Mark whispered, his voice. Sarah's eyes were wide with terror. "It's not just me, right? You heard it too?" We stood there for a long moment, frozen, waiting, but there was nothing. No movement, no rustling. It was as if the forest itself had folly. We continued walking, faster now, but the footsteps didn't stop. They kept following us, never too loud, but always there. We quickened our pace, but so did the footsteps. It was as if something or someone was walking right behind us. And every time we stopped to listen, it stopped too, just beyond our reach. Then, just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, it wasn't like any laugh I had ever heard. It was light, almost whimsical, but it was wrong, deep, dark, and hollow, as if it didn't belong to any human being. It echoed through the fog like a taunt, sending shivers up my spine. My heart raced as I turned to look at my friends. They had heard it too. I could see the fear in their eyes, their wide pupils reflecting the flashlights as they turned in every direction, trying to find the, "Where is it coming from?" Sarah whispered, her voice I couldn't answer. My mind was racing. Who was laughing out here? Who else could be in the woods? The laugh seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. It echoed through the trees like a cruel Joe. "We need to get out of here. Now." Mark's voice was sharp, frantic, his usual calm demeanor. "What's at you?" We started walking faster, but the trail ahead of us seemed to stretch on forever. The fog thickened, and the path became twisted, unfamiliar. The landmarks we had passed earlier had disappeared, as though the forest itself had shifted, and we were with every step the laughter grew louder, closer. I couldn't tell if it was in my head or if it was real, but the feeling of something following us, of something evil, was undeniable. It was there, just behind us, lurking in the fog. "Wait, I can't do this anymore," Sarah gasped, her voice breaking. "Die!" We turned around, only to find that the path we had walked had completely vanished. The trees were now much closer, and the underbrush seemed to have swallowed the trail completely. We were lost, disoriented, trapped. Panic set in. We ran, pushing through the fog, crashing through the underbrush, our breath coming in ragged gasps. But the laughter didn't stop. It was everywhere, echoing off the trees. Coming finally, after what felt like an eternity, we stumbled onto the main trail, the one that led back to the parking lot. It felt like salvation. We were exhausted, our faces pale, our hearts still pounding. We didn't speak as we walked, each of us too shaken to form words. The fog had started to lift, but the fear had... As we drove back home, we tried to brush off the events of the night. But something felt off. The tension hadn't lifted. We could still feel that presence, the thing that had followed us, laughing in the darkness. When we arrived back at our apartment, Mark looked at his arm with a puzzled expression. There, on his skin, was a deep scratch. It was long, jagged, and fresh, but there was no sign of what had caused it. No branches, no sharp rocks, nothing. We all stared at him in disbelief. It didn't make sense. None of us had seen it happen, and yet there it was, a mark left. And then, just as I thought the night was finally over, it happened again. The lag. It was faint, distant, but unmistakable, and I swear, even now, years later, I can still hear it sometimes when the wind howls through the trees. I don't know what it was, or what it wanted, but I do know this. We made a grave mistake that night, and I would never do you dare to listen to the dark. If tonight's tale gave you chills, let us know your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear what creeps you out and what other stories you'd love us to explore. Don't miss out on the next terrifying story. Subscribe to DTC, The Place of the Brave, and join the family that thrives on the unknown. Tap the notification bell so you're the first to hear every spine-chilling tale. Share this video with someone brave enough to face the darkness, and let's dive deeper into the creeps that haunt our world. Comment below and become part of the terror. The darkness is calling, and we want you with us. Story 4, Christmas Ball in the Night, a camping trip of horror. As a young adult, I didn't think that camping trip would change my life forever. My group of close friends had planned it for a long time. After stressful days of studying, we wanted to find a remote place to relax, away from the hustle and bustle of the city. A friend of mine, who was quite knowledgeable about wilderness areas, introduced a camping site in a remote mountainous area where there were no human footprints, few people knew about it, and even fewer people dared to go. This was an ideal place for those who wanted to immerse themselves in nature and seek tranquility. And so we arrived there in the late afternoon, when the light began to fade and darkness gradually spread throughout the forest. After setting up tents and getting ready, we gathered around the campfire. The atmosphere around was strangely quiet, with only the sound of the wind blowing through the branches and the occasional rustle of leaves falling to the ground. In the dim light of the fire, our shadows on the ground looked like strange shapes, as if we were no longer human but part of this forest. As night fell, we began to tell ghost stories, horror stories that we had made up ourselves. Everything was peaceful and happy until a strange noise came from deep in the forest. At first, we didn't pay much attention. Everyone thought it was just the noise of night animals like foxes, weasels, or other small animals. But the noise didn't stop. It was steady, step by step, as if someone was walking around our area. We didn't dare say anything, but everyone felt an indescribable feeling lurking in the space. One of the group decided to go check, carrying a bright flashlight in his hand. He stepped into the darkness. The light from the flashlight was only enough to illuminate a few meters around. The group fell silent, listening for any sound, but there was nothing. There was only an eerie silence, as if the forest had stopped breathing. After a while, he turned around, his face pale, his eyes wide as if he had seen something unbelievable. He said that in the darkness, when the light from his flashlight shone through a large tree, he had seen a figure dressed in white, standing silently watching him from a distance. He couldn't see the face clearly, but those eyes, those empty, expressionless eyes, haunted him all the way back. We laughed, trying to dispel the tension that was starting to build inside us. Some even joked that he must have been too tired, or maybe he was just a shadow reflecting the light. But as the night fell and we began to fall asleep, I couldn't stop thinking about what he had said. An inexplicable feeling of unease rose in my heart, as if something was wrong lurking in the darkness. In the middle of the night, I woke up feeling cold. A strange cold, not like the cold of the air in the forest, but a cold from within, as if something invisible was sucking all the life out of my body. I sat up, looked around in confusion, and then I saw a blurry figure standing not far from our tent. The figure seemed to be blurred in the darkness, but I could make out the vague shape of a person standing still, not moving. At first I thought I was seeing things, rubbed my eyes a few times, but nothing changed. I tried to breathe deeply, but it felt like the air around me suddenly became suffocating. The figure stood still, but then, in the moment I stopped breathing, it moved. Not in a normal way, but like something without legs. It slid across the ground, making no sound. When I looked closer, I realized that the figure did not resemble a human at all. The outlines of the body were unclear, vague, constantly changing as if it were not a physical entity, but part of the darkness. Panic surged through me. I called out to my friends, but they were still sleeping, unaware. A feeling of hopelessness enveloped me. The figure gradually moved closer, each move making me feel like I was suffocating. At this point, I no longer thought about calling out to my friends, but only had one feeling. I had to escape from here. I turned my head to scream, but when I looked back, the figure had disappeared, leaving only utter silence. The group woke up, but no one heard my call. I recounted the story in confusion, but the silence that prevailed still could not dispel the strange feeling within me. We decided to pack up and leave that forest immediately. However, while cleaning up, I discovered something that I still cannot explain to this day. On the ground, there was a large footprint, as if someone had passed through here a long time ago. But the strange thing was that we had not seen anyone other than our group during our stay. When we got into the car, it felt like something was following us from behind. The convoy left the forest, but the silence in the car could not hide the lingering feeling of unease. It was a cold feeling, as if something had followed us out of the forest. Since that day, I have not been able to forget the strange figure in the dark night. That feeling was not just fear, but an invisible, inexplicable anxiety. Perhaps it was just an illusion of mine, but deep down I could not help but think that maybe we had awakened something in that forest, something that should not exist in this world, but was just waiting for someone to dare to step into its territory. Do you dare to listen to the dark? If tonight's tale gave you chills, let us know your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear what creeps you out and what other stories you'd love us to explore. Don't miss out on the next terrifying story. Subscribe to DTC, The Place of the Brave, and join the family that thrives on the unknown. Tap the notification bell so you're the first to hear every spine-chilling tale. Share this video with someone brave enough to face the darkness, and let's dive deeper into the creeps that haunt our world. Comment below and become part of the terror. The darkness is calling, and we want you with us. Story 5. The Mysterious Man on the Trail. Last summer, my group of close friends and I decided to take a long hike to a famous place, far from the hustle and bustle of the city. We had heard many people talk about a mysterious trail which was said to have strange phenomena that not everyone dared to go through, especially at night. Stories about ghosts and supernatural phenomena always make people shiver, but my group of friends and I were still curious and decided to try it, hoping that we would have a memorable, inspiring experience. The name of this trail may sound familiar to many locals, but only those who have lived here for a long time know the stories behind it. According to those who have been here, this trail is where many people have disappeared under inexplicable circumstances, and no one is sure if they were really lost or if something strange happened. However, when hearing the stories, I just took that warning as superstition, something that couldn't scare me. We started our journey early in the morning when the first rays of the day were just beginning to appear, the pale yellow light penetrating the misty fog, creating an enchanting scene. The surrounding scenery was very quiet, only the chirping of birds and the sound of footsteps echoing on the rocky trail. The path was not easy, especially when we had to overcome steep slopes and bumpy roads. Occasionally we met a few other hikers, but no one stopped for long. The atmosphere became more and more deserted and desolate as we went deeper into the forest, as if this path was not meant for humans. After a few hours of climbing, we began to feel tired, but decided to continue because the peak promised a wonderful view. However, the atmosphere became more and more strange. An uncomfortable feeling, like a cold breeze, was penetrating my body that I couldn't explain. Even though there was no wind, I felt like someone was watching me. My every move was being watched by an invisible eye. I couldn't shake that thought, even though I tried to focus on what was in front of me. We continued to climb a little further, but at this moment, one of the group, Min, suddenly held his stomach and sat down. He said that he was suffering from severe stomach pain. At first, we thought he just had a bad diet, but the pain persisted and showed no signs of abating. Min couldn't stand up, and everyone started to worry. I was worried not because of Min's pain, but because of the strange feeling spreading around, as if something was waiting for us ahead. When Min was temporarily stable, we continued to move, but the air around us became increasingly thick. Suddenly, Fuang, the remaining friend in the group, also felt dizzy and had difficulty breathing. She collapsed beside her, unable to stand up. Each of us in the group began to feel a difference in the air. It felt cold, as if we were walking through a space that did not belong to this world. That feeling spread throughout my body, making me unable to shake off the uneasiness. But I dared not say anything for fear of causing everyone to panic. Finally, we decided to take a break on a large rock to regain our strength and prepare to return. That was when I felt a strange gaze from afar. A dark figure stood in the middle of the trail, not far from us. At first I thought it might be a lost person, But when I looked more closely, I realized that something was wrong. The figure of this person was very tall and thin, his clothes were dark, and especially his face could not be seen clearly. Only a wide-brimmed hat covered all his features, making it impossible for me to determine who he was. I looked closely and felt like he was looking back at us, although I could not be sure. My instincts told me that this was not an ordinary person. The surrounding air became heavier and darker. A cold feeling ran down my spine as I realized that this person was not a simple, lost person. He did not move, did not make any movements, just stood still, looking at us as if waiting for something. Suddenly, a cold wind blew, and I felt as if someone was standing right behind me, breathing in my ear. Everything became blurry, as if we were falling into another space, where time and space no longer matched reality. A thought flashed through my mind, but I didn't dare say it out loud. How could it be true? How could it be a ghost? The shadow still stood there, unmoving. A feeling of unease and fear enveloped me. Deep down, I felt that the man was not an ordinary person, but something from another world. I didn't know why, but I felt a gloom radiating from him, as if he were part of the darkness that we couldn't fully understand. Our group didn't dare stay long. We quickly turned back, but every step we took down the mountain felt like something was chasing us. I felt a cold breath on my neck, as if the shadow was chasing us. Every step we took became heavier, as if there was an invisible force pulling us back. And then, when we reached the main road, we were all panting, sweating like we were in a shower. But the strange thing was that the feeling didn't go away. The feeling of being watched, the feeling that there was a shadow following us, still lingered. When I got home, I tried to shake the thought off, but I couldn't. Even though we had left that trail, that mysterious man, that shadow still haunted me. Min's pain, Fuang's tiredness and dizziness, the strange coldness and the shadow standing in the middle of the trail, all were like pieces of a story that we couldn't understand. But I couldn't forget that feeling, as if we had encountered some supernatural force, and that trail was a place we shouldn't have set foot on. Every night when I closed my eyes, the image of that man appeared in my mind. His face was still blurry, but that cold gaze, that gaze that seemed to be watching me, never faded. And I wondered whether we had really encountered a strange man, or whether we had accidentally entered another world, a world that humans should not seek to understand. As the darkness deepens and the stories grow more unsettling, we venture deeper into the unknown together. Each chilling tale brings us closer to the eerie truths lurking just beyond the veil of reality. The terror doesn't stop here. It only gets worse. Subscribe to DTC, The Place of the Brave, now, and stay on the edge of your seat. You won't want to miss what's lurking in the shadows next. Hit that notification bell and prepare for the next terrifying chapter. Remember, in the world of DTC, the creeps are always waiting, and they never rest. Moon.